and are just some of the words that you may hear in today's podcast. Enjoy! We interrupt your regularly scheduled fanfare to bring you news.
President Trump has Alright, Theresa May has again lost. Also,
The news is that
Lisboa has burned down.
That's true. Lisboa did burn down.
Yeah.
But not that. That's board game news too.
Yeah.
We're talking about our new Patreon. It's gone live. It's patreon.com/perfect information.
It is.
What can some people get, Georgios, for their pledges?
The satisfaction of supporting two morons talking into microphones, but also for the lowly price of $1 a month, they can get the perfect information handle explained by us to them.
On the show.
On the show, yeah.
Also, and if we raise just $16 more,
That's 16, as in legal age to drink in Germany.
you'll get an extra show. We will do a monthly perfect information news roundup where we'll not only give you the headlines, we'll comment on them too.
Wow, that's groundbreaking. It truly is groundbreaking. Nobody does that.
Don't fucking undersell this, Georgios.
No, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to, if we get there, I'm really looking forward to putting news together and mocking people.
And it's possible, if you pledge enough money in the future, that we might do an RPG show,
Yes.
that we'll do videos, live playthroughs.
Yes.
And basically, if you want more content from us, you give us the money and we'll give it to you. That's how it works.
Yeah, generally, we would like to expand, and that is easily done with more of the monies.
So patreon.com/perfect information.
That was patreon.com/perfect information.
I return you now to your regularly scheduled bollocks. Hello and welcome to the Perfect Information Podcast, a board game podcast of unashamed solicitation with me, Ben Maddox, and the single reason you should give us your money.
Yorgos Panagiotis.
Welcome.
Yes. Oh, that's naughty.
I open the doors to you, Georgios. I let you into my heart. And then you respond with...
What am I doing here? Why is it so empty and dark?
That's true. That's true. I mean, to be honest, it's not because I'm evil. It's because I'm wholly without empathy, Georgios.
Holy. Yeah. Which holy?
W-H, as opposed to H-O.
As opposed to H-O-L-E-Y? As in full of holes?
Oh, right, yeah. No, H-O-L-L-Y, as in Christmas.
Ah, right, excellent. Well, thanks for joining the really, really bad pun podcast today with Benjamin and me.
And I've decided my name's Benjamin now because I'm gone French because Britain's shit. They're pursuing a trade deal with America. That's amazing. That's like
amazing.
Flash Gordon pursuing a trade deal with Ming the Merciless, Georgios.
Pretty much, yeah. I appreciate your proper nerd reference there.
Indeed. So, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about socialism, I guess. As always.
Is it?
Well, kind of. We're talking about the idea of whether a game's fun is dependent on the group or not. A group dependency of...
Is a game's quality dependent on the people who are playing it?
Yes.
And I guess the question that poses is, does it matter what the game is?
Yes, exactly. That is the question.
At the extreme end, you can say, well, if it's wholly dependent on the people sat around the table, right?
Yeah.
Whatever the game is, it doesn't bloody matter.
Right. And no. But I mean, no.
I mean, to what degree do you... So you're a person who, I think we've established, focuses a lot on the experience around the table.
Yes, I do.
As opposed to the thing on the table.
Strongly, yes.
To what degree is that statement fatuous, that it doesn't matter what the game is? I think clearly it's not right.
Yeah.
But explain why it's not right, because there's a logical argument that it can be, right?
Yes, I think I came up with this I think it's a metaphor or it's an allegory. I don't know enough about, these high-minded things. One of those two.
Story.
Anyway. Story, fine. Which is basically, if you believe that the game's quality is dependent on the group, it's the same as arguing that a drive in the car is dependent on the driver and not the car. Which, if you think about it, there are edge cases where this is true, where you can sit in a very, very bad car, but because of the company, it's going to be a fun time. But for the most part, a good car will make the car ride more relaxing, easier, and more bearable. And if you have a bad group, even the best car is going to break down. So I guess it's a metaphor. I think games work in a similar way. A good game will make the experience smoother, easier, run in an enjoyable way, and will be enhanced if the group is working well together, and it will not protect the group from completely ruining everything. But a bad car or a bad game will make things slightly more challenging for everyone involved.
Well, I think it's one of those things where you see the origin of the disenfranchisement, to sound like a pretentious dick fuck, right?
Well, you've fantastically subverted it by calling yourself a dick fuck.
It's called bathos, Georgios. It's a literary device.
Really? I thought that's where you go when you're dirty.
Also,
all right, okay.
If you're in Greece.
Clearly.
I'm going to the bathos.
Good
that was
Lord.
My Greek accent, love.
Yeah, that wasn't racist at all.
Give me marks out of 10 for my Greek accent. 10 being the premium Mount Olympus.
Right.
0 being Hades.
When you mean marks, you mean marks on your back from the lashes I'm going to give you?
I mean, that's later, but...
Yeah, right.
So what would you say? No, seriously. That accent. I'll do it again quickly.
No, please don't.
Okay. What would you give me out of 10 for the Greek accent?
3, maybe.
To be honest, I'm happy. I'll accept that.
Yeah. No, I've heard proper Greeks speak worse English than that. So
I did a music exam once. I did a singing exam.
Yeah.
And I got great marks for everything, apart from I had to do a sight reading thing. Now I can't read music, right? And they asked me to sing a song whilst reading the music and I can't read music, right? I got 1 out of 10. I was fucking stoked with that one. I took that one home and fucking pasted it on the wall. You know what I mean?
Pretty much.
So that Greek accent, similar. 3 out of 10. I'll fucking take that home all day. But it's, I guess it's a question of where you see the origin of the fun, right? Do you see the origin of the fun coming out of the game? Do you see the origin of the fun coming out of the people?
Or do you see the origin of fun on the interplay between those two? Because a game is fundamentally about interaction, and a game in itself cannot interact, and people amongst themselves might be able to interact, but then they don't need the game to interact in a game way. So basically it is the moment where you merge those two, where the interaction is facilitated through the game and the actors, the players are actually interacting. It's the way that you overlay those two layers that you create fun.
So you saying me constantly resorting to dualisms is reductive?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, it's
like being reductive by saying yes or no.
Yes.
No.
But it's that thing, right? I think if you want to map this onto sort of game parlance,
right?
I think to some degree, if you want to use the distinction that people use, it is, they can be argued as kind of Ameritrash or Euro arguments, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the, you would broadly, I mean, this is broad characterization, but you could broadly say that the Euro-Ameritrashers value experience. And experience is something that lives above the table, where your Eurogamers value construction, mechanics, engineering, which is something that exists on the table.
Yes, I think the difference in emphasis I can agree with. I wouldn't actually draw sharp distinctions between those two approaches, because again, my early argument was that it's the synergy between those two. It's the way those two elements work together that create fun, and whether you appreciate one side of the equation more than the other is really up to personal taste, and there's no right or wrong in that sense. But you have to acknowledge that even in the best cases, you can't completely divorce one from the other unless you make it meaningless. So basically, if you end up with a game that's where the fun comes purely out of the design, it does I think has to come at the expense of group experience.
Well, that depends, doesn't it? So we were talking the other night. We went to a game night the other night, and you were talking to me about various game nights that you're familiar with around the city. And you were talking about one which you characterized as very Euro-y, I think was what you said.
Yes,
and you said
it was a facetious comment. Let's frame it correctly.
But you know, and we've all seen this, and I actively enjoy this, you know, sort of middle-aged men sitting around looking at a board on a table, occasionally moving a cube, right? And then you have other games which consciously try and veer away from that. Mm-hmm. They don't want you looking at the board. They want you looking into the eyes of other people across the table.
Right, yeah.
I think both are valid. And I think both offer something different. And I think if you're talking about dependency of experience, I think those ones where you're looking on the table and you're moving cubes create a stronger safety net of experience than the ones where you're looking at people's eyes across the table.
I'm not sure. Maybe. But I think the biggest distinction I would draw is that, I mean, let's first of all dispel with the idea that this Eurogaming group is some kind of sullen, silent, monk-like ritual where people just stare and occasionally say a word or something.
Well, I think these games, I mean,
let me just finish.
Okay.
Just a second. What happens is that they're playing this game. They're very intently playing this game, very, very intensely playing this game, very focused. And when there's a moment where they can relax because it's not their turn, they don't need to calculate anything. They chit-chat. They have fun.
Sidebar, quickly. No, they bloody don't. No, they bloody don't. Because otherwise, it gets to their turn and they take 20 fucking minutes to do their turn. When it's not their turn, they should be planning their next bloody turn. That's what I do, Georgios. Do you know why? Because I'm the fucking high watermark for moral standards in this bloody world, and I'm the only one who does it. Supermarket, right? I've got my money out ready. Bank. Why am I the only person who goes to a frigging bank machine and takes 2 minutes to get money out? What does every other single fucking person on the planet take 25 minutes to take 10 quid out the bank machine?
I can tell you
Explain
why.
This to me.
They look at the balance and they wonder where their life went wrong.
Fine. I don't need your existential crisis. Get away from the fucking bank machine.
But let's get back to my point. Basically, certain games invite you to engage other players above the table because they make that part of the experience, and certain games don't. Certain games assume you're going to chit-chat, you're going to have a nice sociable time while you play the game, and other games assume you're going to have a sociable time as you play the game. And ultimately, this, I think, might be the distinction that I draw between those camps of Euro games and Ameritrash games. And to kind of support your point, yes, to a certain extent, the safety net, which is the correct pronunciation.
That's right.
Of Euro games is in that, works because they exclude the idea of interacting with other players. They don't exclude, but they don't pay a lot of attention. They're not designed to facilitate the kind of in-game interaction or the kind of engagement amongst players, in any purposeful way.
Well, you're talking about dependability, right? How dependent a game is, that's different from dependability, but how dependent a game is on the people who are playing it.
Right.
And games utilize players in different ways.
Yeah.
So these intricate Euro games I'm not saying that the games play themselves, they don't.
Oh, no.
But what they're trying to legislate for is a what's the word I'm looking for here? They're trying to legislate for a consistent experience.
Right.
And so what they're doing is they remove the onus for the experience from the player and put it into the game. Mm-hmm. Whereas games like The Resistance, like New Angeles to some degree, which we're going to review later, like, Secret Hitler, these kind of games, they gift more of the onus on making the game enjoyable onto the players, right?
Yes. And one of the reasons why I brought up this topic, because I'm cheating again by slightly pre-reviewing New Angeles before we get to the review, is that I think...
Are you saying this is thematically connected?
Yes, it is. What I'm saying is, or what I realized when we were working on the review for New Angeles, was that there seems to be a gray area, sort of a fuzzy area between games that do the heavy lifting for you, but still want you to engage other players, and those that do not. Those that basically leave it all up to you. I think Resistance, even though I quite like it, falls victim to that, in that you really need to do a lot of the cognitive heavy lifting, the social heavy lifting to make the game work. You need to understand how you lie, why you lie, what kind of lies are off limits.
What reactions you should have to certain behaviors too.
Exactly. And what kind of behaviors you should expect happening in the game, and how to sort of get into the right mindset, figure things out. None of this is inherent to the game itself. You need to see it in action. You need to play. You need to run into a bunch of games like I had to that just plain didn't work before it goes, all right, now this is how it's supposed to work. This is the kind of social dynamic I'm looking for. This is the kind of social dynamic I'm supposed to support. And some groups are drawn to this naturally. Some are not. My regular group, for example, still has huge issues with playing Resistance, but they really immediately got Secret Hitler because of the slight changes in rules rigidity in Secret Hitler as opposed to Resistance. And this is sort of the observation I'm trying to sort of get across here, that the game system, the rules, the design can to a certain extent give you the framework to shape or to at least structure the social interaction that's supposed to be generated as you play the game. And some games do that well. I think Secret Hitler, in my experience, has done that better than the Resistance, at least for one of my groups. And now I'm pre-reviewing. I think New Angeles doesn't. Groups that can make up the difference are definitely at an advantage with those kind of games. And groups that struggle with that difference, groups that struggle to sort of lift functional social experience or gaming experience out of the structure that's given to them, are going to have a hard time with certain games, like the Resistance. Like, I think some groups going to have trouble with New Angeles, and some people have trouble with, I have issues with Sheriff Nottingham, for example.
I'm going to put a proposition to you, right? And this is not necessarily reflecting of what I think.
Oh, excellent.
But
Devil's advocate.
I think this is what people say.
Right.
You have your games that have a consistency of experience. They often tend to be Euro games because what it is this feeling that the mechanics have been meticulously put together so they function like a machine. Then you have games that have less of that. Mm-hmm. How would you refute someone saying that the other type, the Resistance-y types, the New Angeles types, are less game? You're getting less game in the box. It's shortchanging you. It's laziness. I can't be bothered to finish the design, right, so I'm just going to put the onus on the players. When in doubt, whack some bidding or negotiation in there.
I think I don't know if I could refute it. I would just definitely disagree with it. I think to a certain extent.
But why do you disagree then?
Because my main disagreement stems from the idea that designers do this on purpose, sort of, not doing the job that they should be doing. I think every designer and every gamer is shaped in his understanding of games by the experiences they've had. So I've had this experience specifically, or really apparently, in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was really into indie RPGs, where I read those small booklets from, role players in the US. And let me tell you, role players in Germany are very different from role players in the US. They're also apparently the Germans are different from role players in the UK as well. And a lot of unspoken assumptions, unspoken ideas about player behavior are baked into these games. And it takes quite a lot of decoding these texts to figure out how to play them in a way that works for my group. And I think this is true for those negotiation or so-called group-dependent games in board games as well. There are assumptions baked into behavior, like, for example, the competitiveness of certain games. I found that in my gaming group and my now non-gamer gaming group, which I've recently opened, competitiveness doesn't rank very highly. So games that assume competitiveness on the part of the players just aren't going to work as well as they should. Whereas other games that work on cooperation or work on just, very, very mellow competitiveness, they work beautifully because that's just the kind of player type that I have at the table, and they can sort of bring their own assumptions, bring their own behaviors to the game and make it work. So I think, coming back to the long-winded point, that designs like the Resistance, even though, like I said, it has rarely worked well for me, comes down to coming from a designer with an experience and a gaming culture that doesn't directly mapped to my own.
I think the Resistance, personally, is the quintessence of the light rule set promoting incredible complexity.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's genius. I think it's an absolute genius. I think it's a landmark in gaming. I think few games have been made that are as refreshing and original and frankly as good. I think it's simply a masterpiece.
Oh no, I agree. I'm just saying all this can be true and the game can still not work with my gaming group.
Absolutely.
Because of the people involved. And this again goes back to the idea of a game's quality and the group dependency. In some cases, those are connected, like the argument you put forth, like designers being lazy. In some cases, it's unconnected, as in, I think we agree on the Resistance, where it's just a different set of gaming backgrounds clashing and simply not working, which is, again, why Secret Hitler worked for us. Mostly because we're Germans and it's about Hitler.
And it's a bit transgressive and you can laugh behind your hands and go, oh, I'm not going to Hitler.
You don't laugh at the Hitler. You never laugh at the Hitler. Nein, nein, nein! You don't laugh at the Hitler.
9 times you laugh at him.
Yes, of course.
But
it's the old saying: if you laugh 9 times into a mirror in Germany, Hitler pops out.
Oh, it's amazing. So he's like a German Candyman.
Yes.
Does he stick a meat hook up your ass?
Pretty much, yeah.
So the thing is, though, I think we can pretty much agree that to an extent, and I think this is definitely games are dependent to a greater or lesser degree on the people who are playing them.
Yeah, of course. It shapes it. Yeah.
But there are certain behaviors, I think, that can always trash a game, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think quietness...
Cuss words, I think. Cuss words...
That's right. I think swearing is the greatest evil. And all of these people...
If you swear, you obviously run out of arguments.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you clearly don't have a vocabulary, do you?
Yeah.
And the point... I don't know whether I've said this on here, but I always wanted, in my teenage years, to become a lexicographer for one reason.
You do know that has nothing to do with, investigating women's legs.
No. It's compiling dictionaries, Georgios. Yeah, I know what a I knew what one was at 17.
See, I was kind of, when I was young, I wanted to be a lexicographer as well because I thought I could, examine women's legs, but no.
You know, those t-shirts that say, boob detective. They're hilarious, Georgios.
They are.
That is the height of comedy.
It is. But right after zaniness.
I wanted to be a lexicographer, right? Because I fucking love swearing. I think swearing is the heartbeat of any language. It's vital. It's exciting. It has its place where you don't use it, but I think swearing makes speaking fun. And I wanted to become a lexicographer. So when these po-faced fucking dickheads, who, by the way, swear like fucking troopers behind closed doors, I'm convinced of it. And they went, oh, swearing is just an indication that you have a limited vocabulary. I could turn around and go, I compile dictionaries, you fucking dickhead.
You would kind of hope you would have a better retort than fucking dickhead, though.
No, that's the point, Georgios. That's the point.
No.
I'm belying their opinion by my profession. That's the point.
Yes, but by sort of proving them right.
No, but then they say, oh, demonstrate some vocabulary. And I could say, yes, the flight of a bird is very undulatory this morning. You fucking twat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway, I'm digressing from my point.
Set of behavior that damages.
Yeah, there's certain behaviors that will tank something. So I don't think quietness... There are certain games... So the Resistance, quietness will tank it. If everyone's quiet. If one person's quiet, quiet, that's great because they may be sort of intrinsically quiet, but then you're thinking, now, why are they quiet? Right.
Actually, I would actually disagree with that, I think. I think individuals in a group of Resistance being quiet is far more damaging to the experience than everyone being quiet. Because when everyone's quiet, assuming that they actually know how to play the game and that just choose not to be, very, very, just not talking a whole lot again, I keep bringing up Secret Hitler because, again, I really like it. Our Secret Hitler games were fairly quiet for social deduction games, but they always had these moments of outbursts where all of a sudden accusations started flying around, but then they were quiet again. And then and that worked really, really well. If it had just been one player being quiet, it would have just been drowned out by everybody else.
Right, but it depends on the mode of their quietness. And this certainly is dependent upon not knowing the person to some degree.
Oh yeah.
I think if you're playing, I think the Resistance can work very well in a group that don't know don't know each other. I mean, in some ways a bit better because you don't have that metagaming thing. Although the metagaming can sometimes be wonderful, it can sometimes, throw a spoke in the wheel, right? But there's certain behaviors. So I think quietness isn't necessarily an issue. You can tank games with quietness, but I think, so this comes from last night.
Right.
I had a very grumpy game.
Oh, yeah.
Of Expedition Northwest Passage. Mm-hmm. Where there's one guy, and he's a nice enough guy, I guess, but he couples the twin sins of taking forever to do his turn and being ultra, ultra competitive.
Yeah.
To the point where, constant rules lawyering and not rules lawyering in the sort of, sorry, is that how it's done? More than, you did that fucking wrong, you did that wrong, take that back, that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that behavior...
Social grace.
Yeah. I think hyper-competitiveness almost always tanks the game, am I right?
Yeah.
One person then holds supreme power as to whether that game is going to be good or bad.
Yeah.
Right?
I think a strong disparity between competitive attitudes at the game table is bad. If they have one person who's hyper competitive and a few person who aren't, or just a little bit, that's a problem because in a certain way you're not playing the same game.
But hyper competitiveness characterizes itself in very ugly ways, right? So it's constant seeking to gain an advantage by bending rules, by cheating sometimes, by constantly questioning whether people can do things. That's why in professional sport, right, you have referees, because hyper-competitiveness promotes that sort of antisocial behavior, which is antithetical to a quality game experience, right?
Yeah, well, then my only exception comes to the term hyper-competitiveness, because I don't think competitiveness within a game is bad by definition.
No.
I think a hyper-competitiveness, I would have used it, I think, this is just semantics now, but I would have used it in a sense of being strongly competitive as opposed to crossing boundaries in your competitiveness.
It's a question of priorities, right?
Yeah.
Where if you prioritize you winning the game over the quality of playing the game, then that is going to tank it almost every time, right?
Yes. And I think, and again, it ties back to why I sort of wanted to step back from using hyper competitiveness as a term for crossing boundaries, because that kind of behavior, the idea of my victory is more important than the game experience.
No, those boundary crossing things are a symptom. It's not the disease.
Oh yeah, no, but yeah, exactly. But there can be symptoms. They can happen, but they're not bound to hyper competitiveness. Is what I'm trying to say. What the point I'm trying to make here is that a lot of people occasionally slip into this mode where they do become, at least momentarily, more focused on winning and less focused on the group experience. There is so small lapses of judgment, if you want to call it that.
There is one game that does it to me every time. I played it on Sunday and it does it to me every time. And I come away from the experience, although I absolutely loved it, I come away from the experience sometimes thinking, maybe I didn't speak to people in the way I should speak to people. And that's Through the Ages.
Right, yeah.
Through the Ages riles me if someone declares, because the thing is, I'm a pompous, hypocritical dickhead, right? And I believe I hold some key to sort of moral superiority that no one else possesses. So in Through the Ages, I've never declared a war and I've never declared an aggression. I don't want to. I don't care to. When I see someone going up the military track, it fucking winds me up because I know I have to take myself away from building my nice bloody city into focusing on building soldiers, and I never want to. And it's not some po-faced moral thing about anti-military. It's just not the way I like to play games. So I'll be with you in a second. Someone then declared a war on me for no good reason, other than, it brings them advantage. And
that is by definition the reason why you do that.
Yes, I know it is. I'm trying to be moral in that. And I turned around.
You're just being dishonest.
I turned around to him and I went, fucking hell, why are you fucking declaring a fucking war on me? That's outrageous. And I wasn't joking. That's really bad.
Yeah, no. Again, I think this is a phenomenon that we shouldn't dismiss as being, awful people stuff. It's things that happen at the game table. Sometimes we get a bit too wound up in winning. We're human. We're fallible. Well, some of us. But,
Popey. He's not.
I wasn't talking about him.
Oh, no, I know you weren't. But I'm just saying, that's another example of someone who's infallible.
That is true. I think these moments happen, and I think we should at least acknowledge that they shouldn't happen, or at least be, own them in the sense of, yes, I did that. I'm sorry. Shouldn't have, or whatever. Or at least, even if we can't bring ourselves to vocalize them, at least acknowledge that next time you play, you're going to put more of an effort into supporting the group experience and less
not being a dickhead.
Yes. But going back to this idea of hyper-competitiveness, I think some games do assume a strong sense of competitiveness in the players and are designed for strong competitiveness among the players, even hyper-competitiveness, assuming that you don't cross boundaries that your group might not consider acceptable to cross. So,
I literally had to quiet a guy from shouting at me last night.
Right.
Because I did a move that disadvantaged him later in the game. Not because I was cheating.
Right, yeah.
But because it meant that he couldn't do what he wanted on his turn, and he went fucking nuts about it. And accused me of cheating and all of this sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's very close to boundary crossing.
And it's really interesting. It's really interesting that when you talk about a game being dependent upon a group or not, it's certain modes of behavior can dictate that the minority can completely infect the experience of the majority. Do you think that's more common, that just one person tanks it? Is that when something is tanked by a group, is it a factor of just one person ruining it and that infecting the group? Or do you think there's some sort of groupthink that ends up tanking something?
I think it's closer to groupthink than a single player, in the sense that, in my experience, the people I play with most of the time are socially experienced enough or socially skilled enough to sort of adjust to the tone at the table. So basically, if everyone's having fun, if everyone's doing silly things, they're not going to all of a sudden go hyper competitive on them. And if everyone's hyper competitive at the table, they're going to raise their game as well. It's just how things play out. So if one person sort of sets the tone, because they are doing a very, very precise, competitive, calculated, and really heavy move on the table, everybody else is not going to keep playing a low stakes game all of a sudden. They're going to go, all right, this is the kind of game we're playing now. We're not playing just to mess around, to have a bit of fun. We're going to play, for realsies. Things are going to change. The behavior is going to change. Sometimes there's a little back and forth. I've had situations where we called out one player for overthinking their turns, treating it like a much more important and competitive game than everybody else was playing. But for the most part, once one player sets the tone, the rest kind of adjust. So it's not a single player tanking it, like pushing it into a direction that might not be fun or might not be perfectly workable with this game. It's more that once the group settles on a certain tone, negotiate a certain tone, because one person sort of pushes forward in one direction, this is what's going to happen.
I think it's interesting because I sort of base my broad macro judgments on what happened to me within the last 5 minutes generally. So
it's very presidential, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm nothing if not a feather for each wind that blows. But because of last night's experience, I keep thinking now, and because I'm doing confirmation bias, of so many situations where one person has just infected the whole group. So I think, and I kind of prefer, I think, what happened last night, this sort of hyper competitiveness, this investment in the game that borders over into sort of overzealousness.
Yeah.
I think I prefer that. If I had to choose, I prefer that to apathy, though. The people who get 2 turns into a game and go, I don't like this, so I'm just going to do suboptimal shit, and I'm going to sit there with a fucking face like a wet Wednesday afternoon and make sure everyone else is bloody miserable because I am. I think that's really, because in the first instance, it's kind of out of your control. Maybe you should be able to control your emotions better, but we're all guilty of shit. Whereas in the second instance, that's willful sabotage of people's time, which I think is kind of unconscionable.
I don't know. I think both fall in the same category. Both are cases. I mean, I've been the sullen, I'm not enjoying this game right now type of player. And it always has to do with you not, in that moment controlling your emotions as well as you usually can.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the whole situation where someone just sits back for the entire game and just goes, it's my turn.
Yeah, of course. Sure. I mean, but that's sure. Maybe one is an outburst in a moment and they realize they've gone too far, and the other one does not realize that they are actually negatively impacting the entire game and not just their
And actually,
own turn.
I think this might be now. I might be psychologically analysing you here, and it might be bollocks, and you're more than welcome to tell me. But I think here, with what we're talking about and our sort of attitudes towards it,
right,
is maybe to some degree defending things we're prone to doing ourselves.
Of course, yeah.
Because I absolutely, if I don't like a game and I see that the rest of people are enjoying it, I like to keep my counsel.
Right.
On that. Afterwards, then I will say things.
Yeah.
It's very rare that I will sit there and go, fucking hell, this is dreadful, isn't it? It's just very rare I do it. Although, getting fucking nuts and angry about someone fucking up my plans, even though that's part of the game, is something I'm very prone to do.
Yeah. And actually, I've done both in the same game even. I think the only time I actually get mad at people attacking me is when I'm not having a good time already. That really ticks me off. Like, you're already
kicking you when you're down is rough.
Yeah, that just really pisses me off. But yeah, I've had these moments where I was not enjoying the game. Oh, that's not even entirely true. I think people were assuming I'm not enjoying the game as a whole, as opposed to not enjoying this particular play of it. Because for the most part, I always appreciate the intellectual challenge of, taking a game apart mentally and seeing why things happen, or why they might be, why they were supposed to happen that way, or why they maybe they weren't supposed to happen that way, but did. So I enjoy that. I'm getting, no matter how the game ends up, I'm going to enjoy that part of it anyway. Sometimes a particular play is just not very enjoyable to me.
I mean, I think I'm more forgiving, I guess, of the short-term infraction than the long-term infraction.
Yeah, I think I'm the other way around.
I think if someone sits there for the entire game and just tanks the experience.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm not the other way around.
Whereas, if someone has a moment of explosion, that's. I mean, I think they can equally have a debilitating impact, but at the same time, I understand that more because that gels much more with my personality. Because I never want to, and I guess everyone can say this, but I don't ever intend to hurt people's feelings.
Oh, I do.
But, sometimes I'm an inescapable prisoner of my fucking id, right? And so I do.
Yeah. But I think in my experience, I've had both of these moments happen at the game table. I think one about 10 years ago, not saying that it hasn't happened since, but the one I remember right now is 10 years ago, was where I was getting mad at something. And I realized after I kind of calmed down how it soured the rest of the game, because there's these after effects, these echoes of what happens. So even though it's just a singular moment of emotional outbursts, it still colors the rest of the game just as much as the apathetic player colors the rest of the game. Even though there was not single point where things went south, it just progressively got worse and worse and worse, and it was. Everybody felt it. Yeah,
and it just seems to me the apathetic, can't be bothered, seems to me more sustained and takes more effort to maintain.
I think there's two sides of the same coin. In the end, if I was as mature as I try to be, the correct thing to do would be to, address it. To just not, let's finish up the game, it's just going to take another 45 minutes, just, go through it and just go, right, let's take a break, and now let's how about we calm down. We can stop the game if it's really that awful, or maybe we should talk about how you acted right now. I've never done that. I know I should. I know I should have, as a host at least, I should have the authority. I kind of have the authority to just go, right, stop. This is not kosher.
I think in most cases it's not necessary, but there are times when I've been victim to my own lack of control, and it's fucking embarrassing. Yeah. It's fucking embarrassing. And if someone had have been mature enough and said, Ben, stop being a dickhead, then I think it would have brought me to. I'd have had a moment of clarity. And of course, we're socially cowardly enough that we very rarely do that, right?
Yeah, I think we just don't have the tools. I certainly am not familiar with the kind of tools I would need to diffuse a situation like that, or even feel confident enough that I'm able to diffuse a situation like that. And in case you're just tuning in, this is Pouring Your Heart Out as a Gamer with Ben and Jahres.
Anyway, so, come on the guild, tell us what you think. Are games dependent on the people, or are they dependent on the game?
Or tell us about your great gaming sins of, not having a lid on your emotions.
I'm going to go and have a shower now, Georgios, because all of this self-expulcation, which isn't a word, love, has made me all sweaty.
All right. I'm not.
Is that your name on the list? Well, get in there then. Get to the bar and get buckled. Welcome to the guild.
Oof.
You're a balloon now.
That's my worried exhalation, Georgios.
All right,
I've seen this before.
What have you seen? Your worried exhalation. Have you looked at a mirror?
Look, I'll tell you, right? We were talking last week.
Who?
Janine was doing hot yoga.
Oh,
she was hiding something from me.
Yes. Did you check for my batteries or not?
I told you she doesn't let me touch the batteries, Georgios.
No, fair enough.
And so, I get home last night and she's on the phone.
Right.
And I walk in and she hangs up pretty quickly.
Oh, well, yeah, of course. I mean, it's rude to talk when somebody else comes in.
And she sort of, looks down. And I go, all right, darling, how are you doing? Feeling, apprehensive. I've seen it before. She's left me before. We spent time apart. And frankly, Georgios,
yes,
my heart was rended in twain.
Wait. You mean like computer generated and sort of,
Yeah, you whack it in Adobe and then you make it showable on the internet.
That's cool. So it's three dimensions.
I don't know what rendering is, Georgios. Anyway, and so back to character. Anyway, she's like, and I'm like, you're right, darling. Yeah. Who are you talking to? Oh, no one. In that, and she can't look at me in the eyes and that. And she's got all red in the face, and I'm thinking.
Well, I mean, let's keep in mind. Occasionally, I can't look you in the eyes because I start giggling.
And I'm trying to say, Georgios, it's a horrible feeling. She's grown weary of me, and she's seeing another person. I don't know whether that be a man or not, but that she's seeing someone else, and I'm worried that love that blossomed is now deflowered, Georgios.
Well, Ben, I have to say, you said some stupid things on this podcast before, and in this guild, but I have to admit, this one is dumber than everything else you've said before.
I mean, you go home and you see your missus, right? She's talking on the phone and you walk in and she hangs up on you.
Of course.
And then she goes, I'm not talking to no one special.
Yeah, and then we have sex.
Did have sex?
You didn't have sex. Wait, why did you go home then?
I live there, George.
Well, yeah, but don't you live there to have sex?
to eat food, to have a poo as well.
I don't get it. Wait, so you have a home and you go there and you don't have sex?
Sometimes, yeah.
This is weird. You English, you have weird habits.
Very regularly, too.
All right, calm down.
I can't. You're just...
Don't let me slap you.
Anyway, what was the question last week?
You have a weird way of dealing with emotion.
I'm very up and down emotionally, Georges. I think I'm going through the change.
I think you are, yeah. The question was, what did you think of this year's Spiel des Jahres? Spiel des Jahres, for those who do not know, is a gaming award.
It is. We were there, Georges, weren't we?
Now that you mention it, yes.
What did you think to the pasta?
What? The pasta? That was all right.
Yeah, they put on a spread. Swanky micro herbs and that. It was pretty astonishing. Anyway, so, What did the young Tonias Boydell say?
Tonias.
That's what Tony's short for, Tonias.
Oh, good lord.
It's Latin. It's a Latin name. It's an ex-president. They had presidents, right?
Yeah,
it's an ex-Roman president was called Tonias.
Yeah.
A lot of people, in Britain are named after
the guy with the
him.
athlete's foot.
He 1 foot really muscular, 1 foot sort of athlete's foot, 1 foot sort of normal, like a normal bloke's foot.
I see.
Great hopper.
Senor Boydell.
As was Dennis.
Oh, good lord, that was... I know you're giggling away like this was the great coup, but come on. Tony Boydell wrote, I thought Magic Maze was tiresome, and that's all we have to hear from Tony Boydell. Let's move on.
Sorry, Tony. Magic Maze is ace.
It is.
You should come and play it with some real people. We'll show you how to magic that maze.
He can't bear to play a new Knizia game. I can see where he's coming from, but I think Eldorado's worth it.
Yeah, Eldorado's fine. I mean, the thing is, I don't know why he can't bear to play a new Knizia game. It's possible that he holds sort of those earlier grand titles, your Jahres and your Tigris and Euphrates, in such high esteem, and it hurts him to see such a great man come down to such normal heights. Possibly. Eldorado is nothing but fine, though. It didn't massively excite me. It was enjoyable, but it wasn't massively exciting.
I think that's how I feel about King Domino. I think it's fine. It's not bad. It's fine.
What does he say about King Domino?
It's fun, chunky, and I won the first game by a country mile using a very, very naughty pun. So that made me look upon it most favourably. Again, suggesting, very humorously, that the only reason why he likes King Domino is because he won it. Thus, undermining his own authority of making an evaluative statement about those 3 games.
Hoisted on your own...
Plutard.
That's right. I don't know what that means.
It's French for too late.
Okay, you've been hoisted on your own too late.
Yeah, that's pretty much
There's
it.
no comma in that sentence either.
No.
Too late is a noun for something.
Yeah, King Domino is fine. I think it's inoffensive to the point of being dull, but it's fine. I mean,
I think as we said on the show, Magic Maze was great, innovative and really interesting.
Yeah.
I could see how it would be tiresome in his defense, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
If you're playing with some dickhead who's going knock 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 knock,
like you,
like me, then I'd imagine how that's tiresome. But with the correct group, it's wondrous.
It is. With the correct group, there you go. Thematic tie-in. But that reminds me, I didn't quite notice it, but I do remember when you played it at BerlinCon, we played with 2 girls, right? 8, 10, whatever they were. And it seems to me that one of the players we were playing with, who I'm not going to name, and you were a bit put off by the aggressiveness with which these young ladies were using the red player marker.
I wasn't put off with it. I thought it was great. I love kids making noise. No, really, I love it. I think kids should make as much noise as they can. And, because you're going to end up in a fucking job in which you can't make noise. Make noise while the sun shines.
Clearly you are not a father.
Clearly I am not a father. Okay, so... carrying on then,
yes,
we go to the inimitable and rather well-renowned designer of Citrus, the Order of the Golden Compass. That's not what it's called.
Probably not.
Pizza Slice Man. That's New York Slice.
Oh, it's his.
That's his.
I did not know that.
Young Jeffrey Allers. What does he say?
He writes, "Isn't King Domino just another multiplayer solitaire puzzle, though? And Bärenpark as well. I suppose it's better than actually putting together a jigsaw puzzle together because you can be creative with your own puzzle. I don't like following directions with puzzles or model airplanes, but I miss the player interaction."
Well, I mean, I think King Domino is so stripped back and so simple. There's one area of player interaction, right?
Yeah.
And that's what tile you take.
Yeah.
But I think there's also that future aspiration of, that would be great, only to see your hopes dashed. And that's where the drama lies in the game. I think the game is just fine, but I don't think it's bad, and I don't think it's a puzzle. I think it's definitely a game.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I don't really enjoy that whole, playing on the knife's edge and going, I don't want you to take this, now you took it, my hopes are dashed aspect of a game. That's just no fun to me, but I understand that it is quite enjoyable to you, so you're wrong and I'm right. But I think, again, I'm not... Maybe it's multiplayer solitaire, but honestly, I don't care. It doesn't matter.
No, multiplayer solitaire is wonderful, and I don't think...
I don't know if it is, but I don't think it is...
Well, it has...
I don't think it's an evaluative statement of what a game is.
No.
I mean, it's like saying, is this the kind of game where you use both hands? I don't like that.
Well, unfortunately, multiplayer solitaire has become, in the gaming parlance, to have a negative connotation, right?
That's true, yeah.
But the fact is, it's a term... It needn't be qualitative, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, no,
I agree with you. I think it's fair to say I wish King Domino was a game that had more player interaction, which I agree with. I kind of agree with. I could imagine it be maybe more interesting, more than fine if it had a different kind of player interaction than the one it does have. But I don't think that the quality that sort of makes it stand out, that makes it be enjoyable, is dependent on how little or how much player interaction there is. Just an aspect of the game that is not as pronounced as it would be in other games. I think that's fine. And like you said, I don't think it should be evaluative. I think you can bemoan the lack of player interaction because you like player interaction, but somehow I feel, in my mind at least, I find it weird to fault a game for not being exactly what you want it to be.
Well, of course, but of course, that's how everyone does evaluate games, because that's kind of, I mean, I think every kind of review of anything, whether it be a really reasoned, well-written, enjoyable review, or whether it just be an offhand statement about why you like something, is all about justifying a point of view, justifying your reaction to it, and unpicking why you have that reaction, right?
I don't know.
An objective review is an oxymoron, right?
No, I disagree with that.
Explain yourself.
That's going to take a long while. We don't have the time. I was going to... Actually, let me just do a quick sidebar, and I hope people will remind me if I fail to actually deliver what I'm about to say now. A while back, there was an article, a blog post by Meeples Like Us, I believe.
Okay.
The guys who do accessibility breakdowns. He was arguing about the myth of objectivity. And I sat down and thought, I can see where he's coming from, but I disagree on very, very fundamental points, and I want to address them. I sat down, did a first draft of a blog post sort of replying to that, where I said, no, objectivity and all these things that matter, and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't finish it. I keep returning to this because I think it's an interesting topic. I think it's something, it's a discussion I would like to have.
So you think, I mean, just broadly speaking, if you think if we're evaluating games, we should aspire towards objectivity?
Kind of, but the problem, I think, again, is partly terminology and what we call objectivity, what we call subjectivity, and what we actually want from a review and what we get from a review. They're all mixed in together. I think it's, again, one of the reasons why I'm trying to finish that article is because I have trouble sort of laying out my arguments in a clear and concise way.
I mean, I think there is a letting people off the hook, especially within board games, as to their obligation of reviewers. I think that this argument that a lot of people have, which is, oh, well, I kind of like the games he likes, so if he says he likes it, then I'm probably going to like it, and that's why I watch his reviews, lets a lot of people off the hook when they're failing to deliver a decent review on something.
Right, yeah.
But when I think I write pretty good reviews. I mean, no one fucking reads them, but regardless, I think I write pretty good reviews, but I never aspire towards objectivity.
Yeah, I think the core of the argument I'm making is that the argument is basically the opposite of, when we talk about objectivity in reviews, we're not talking about the opposition of the dichotomy of objectivity and subjectivity. We're talking about the dichotomy of objectivity and relativity. And that's ultimately the point I'm trying to get at. The idea that we want reviews to not be relative. We want to have some sort of outside
universal rubric that we can. That's why people use star systems, right?
Yeah, not necessarily.
That's an attempt to sort of, this is we have an idea about how this fits into this system, and as long as you understand this system,
exactly,
then you can, at a quick glance, or maybe not even at a long glance, understand the quality of it.
Exactly. And the idea and the point I'm trying to make is that we need a standard like this, not in a sense of universal as in true for everyone and everything, but in a way of actually meaningfully talk about the qualities of a game, or the strengths and the weaknesses. Because if we don't have some sort of rubric that we can all refer to, regardless of whether we personally like the good things as much as everybody else, or dislike the bad things as well as much as everyone else, but if we need some sort of outside standards of what we consider this is, a good thing in a game, this is a bad thing in a game. And if you like the bad thing, that's not necessarily because your opinion is bad or anything, but just, these are aspects of it. But if we don't have this this objective rubrics, then what the fuck are we doing?
Well, I mean, it's, it's madness to discuss about sort of pure objectivity and subjectivity. I'm not going to do that. But I agree with you, broadly speaking. I think the community has sort of general ideas about what they think is good, what they think is bad on very broad terms. And I think where board game critics, for want of a better term, fail is explaining those well.
Exactly. I mean, to a certain extent...
And they fall into the trap of, this was fun, right?
Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, you can't really... They're not obligated to explain the entire catalog of values or what they value within a game, because you can't ask people to read like a reference book before they start reading a review.
Right.
Over time, you realize what kind of things people value. And this is the sort of... I don't think it's so much letting people off the hook, but it's a shorthand for people to understand. Right, I've watched enough reviews of this reviewer. I understand where they are coming from. I think I understand their value system, for lack of a better term, and I can either relate to that, or it fits my own, or even I understand it. I know where they differ from mine, and I can make I feel I can make an informed decision on a game after reading a review from those guys. And ultimately, I think reviewers need to have the responsibility to at least reflect upon their own value system. They need to...
And justify their arguments. I mean, this is the point.
Lay out the argument, because justification assumes that there can be a right and wrong argument, when in reality, what you're trying to say is, these are the reasons why I came to this conclusion. Okay,
this is semantics. What I mean is...
it always is.
This is what I think, and this is why I think it. And this is what supports it. That's what I mean by justify their arguments, right? Okay, anyway, let's move on.
Yes?
To ingredient X.
Is it love?
It's booze, Georgios. It's always the booze.
That's true.
Gilhover.
Senor Gilhover, because we're all Spanish now. I try not to care too much about awards and their outcomes. That way lies madness.
Now, I have an issue with this.
Yes.
I remember, I'll give you a quick story.
Maybe. Yeah, go on.
A quick story. I remember, it was about 10 years ago. I was in the pub and I was talking to some lad. And it was award season amongst the movies. And I talked to him and I said something about, I wonder who's going to win X or Y Golden Globe.
Yeah.
And he chastened me.
Right.
Quite strongly. And he just turned around and he went, what the fuck do you give a toss about who wins this award? And I was very chastened. And for a while, I sort of walked around with that opinion in my head. And I went, yeah, it's all bollocks. Because I'm very easily swayed. But then I eventually came round to it and I went, no, you fun-sucking asshole. Awards, now you can argue about the import of them and whether they're correct, but awards, I get incredible enjoyment out of them. I enjoy the Oscars. I enjoy all that chat around who's going to win and do they deserve it and is the Oscars bollocks and hashtag Oscars so white and all of that. I love it. Spiel des Jahres is the same. Oh, yeah. I enjoy the chat around it. I enjoy the debate that it promotes within the groundswell of the hobby. Because we can't all be creators, we can't all exist on that level of the creed, but what we can do is we can ignite the passion in people by saying, this is good, this is bad, this deserves to be nominated, this doesn't deserve to be nominated. I like the concept of awards, and I like the partisanship that it promotes. I like I want this to win, I want this to win. I love all of that stuff. And I think to say, fundamentally, if your game or your film or whatever doesn't win and you get crazy about it and go to the streets, that's an obvious overreaction. But the whole furore and debate is great fucking fun, no?
I think I agree that, the discourse that is generated through the existence of these awards and what they do and how they're made is a positive thing. I think it's a good thing that we have a reason to talk about games in an evaluative manner other than I played this, I liked this, I played this, didn't like this. We can talk about this is a better game because ABC, or this is not worth mentioning because there's so many games out there that are so much better, and so on and so forth. I think I can see his point. I can see his argument from the designer's point of view, because from that perspective, that way lies madness. If you get hung up about getting awards, winning awards, wanting awards, that's not healthy. I agree. But as pure gamers, these awards are great. I think I mentioned this in the Spiel des Jahres show as well, which probably nobody listens to because it's loud. And but I mentioned, these selections the jury makes are more or less the impulses. Like economically, they're a strong impulse into what is going to penetrate this hobby and reach the mainstream. And as such, it becomes representative of the hobby where it is right now. This is sort of the obligation I consider to be in the hands of the Spiel des Jahres jury.
And everyone talks about, right, how, the Spiel des Jahres brings new people into the hobby. But what they don't talk about is what happens every year, which is clear, how it reignites the people who are in the hobby already. How much debate and how much discussion it promotes, and all of that is very vital. And fundamentally, and I know we live in a puritanical world in which if something's just simply enjoyable, it's not worthy, but it's also bloody good fun.
Yes, it can be. I think I've seen, at least in the German blogosphere, I've seen mentions that kind of veer on the hysterical, in the sense of people being very aggressive and dismissive and they've ruined everything. And
that's great. That's great fun too.
No,
all of those crazy people standing on the top of mountains and yelling. It's great fun too. I bloody love it.
Yeah, no, I don't think I do. I think
as long as even your Alex Jones types who are all sort of like, it was said on the Stater Games and it was only a joke. So I'm not saying that it's real, but I'm sure there are people who believe this who say, if you look at the Spiel des Jahres, and they're wrong actually because it was 2, but only one German game was nominated, and it wins the award. There are people. I love all that stuff. I love it.
I don't. I think as pure surface entertainment, it's amusing. I can see but as a way of taking the temperature of the hobby, I think it's annoying. I think it brings out some of the more obnoxious traits amongst gamers. The pedanticness, the aggression, the desire to win arguments for the sake of winning arguments, as opposed to having like an actual proper passionate discussion about something we both love, as opposed to putting down games somebody else likes.
Well, on this, those people are going to do that regardless of which arena that they're in. There are certain people who just enjoy the contention, and I think...
Yeah, no, I agree. But those people should be at least criticised and shunned to some extent.
Well, anyway... George, I've calmed down now.
Yeah. I can sort of see your cold returning.
That's right. I'm sort of dreading going home. You got any advice for me? What I should do when I get back home? George?
Shower.
That's a given.
And if you can, suggest sexual intercourse. It's how you do it, right? In English, you walk up and you go, "Dear lady, would you prefer some sexual intercourse later in the evening?" And she answers with, "God, no." Is that how it works? I've never been to it. I've never slept with an English woman, so I don't know.
Well, I don't.
That's 3 eyes in one sentence. You sound rather egotistical.
Well, I'm going to go home, Georgios, and I'm going to hash this out. And hopefully...
On Twitter?
That's how I do all my communication.
That is true, yeah. I wish you would stop talking on the phone, on Twitter when you're on the toilet. I know you're trying to be presidential, but really, you need to stop.
Hey, at Janine639. What the bloody hell's going on? Hashtag confused. Say goodnight, Georgios.
I think I'm trying to keep you away from your mobile phone and Twitter account.
It's crass, unsophisticated, and emotionally manipulative. It's this week's review.
Welcome to the annual convention of slimy international supervillains, or Axes. You are here because you're truly the worst of the worst. I see we have a delegation of people who repeat daily mail talking points with us. Glad you could find the time away from masturbating into the Union Jack. Of course, our gathering would not be complete without the Boston elevator farters. Tacos, am I right, guys? And a hello to the reverse racism ranters from, I want to say South Africa? Oh no, it's Slough. And the guys who thought Cherry Poppin' Daddies was an acceptable name for a band. Where did your parents go so wrong? But now a special treat for today is the group of illustrious supervillains just flown in from New Angeles itself. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for capitalists. As we all know, capitalists are the root of all evil. Their money-grabbing ways are sure to leave the common man in the dust. And isn't that what we're here for? Now I am told these CEOs are manipulating the lives, well-being and productivity of New Angeles to make more money. That is great. None are above helping each other out to kick dirt into people's faces and make bank while they're at it. Terrific. All the while playing a bit of one-upmanship with each other while the city burns to the ground. Groovy. And to top the villainy off, one of you guys might be working for the feds. And as we all know, the awful government will step in when the kids, respectable businessmen, have turned the city into a toxic dung heap. And isn't the government the true villain when you think about it? Isn't it the CEOs of the world that are the ones to tackle questions of health, jobs and internet access? Because what is more pure and altruistic than unabashed self-interest? Thank you, that's the kind of cutting-edge political satire and sharp wit that has attracted the movers and shakers of New Angeles.
Yeah. Skip to the end.
It's the one sentence review. The push and pull of the over-the-table wrangling is supported by solid mechanics that make New Angeles the oligarch's game of choice.
A many-layered cake of different ideas and concepts, New Angeles dazzles with its clever rules, but saddles the players with the job of turning them into a functional and enjoyable whole.
Jahres? Ooh, what's that in the corner of the room?
I don't know, but it's eating peanuts with its nose.
Zoot zoot, Jahres. That's the sound of the cybernetics installed in the elephant that is parking itself in the corner of the room and having a dump.
I was quite certain there was the sound of a Frenchman coming in and cursing like a 4-year-old. Zoot zoot.
But in a cyberpunk manner.
Alright, so zoot zoot.
So the elephant in the room this week, Jahres, is, does anyone really care about the Android universe? Over to you.
Well, the answer, since I obviously speak for everyone, is yes, Nabi. I've played a bit of Netrunner, like the first generation or so. And it was quite fun. I quite enjoyed it. I quite enjoyed the little details you can discover in the cards and the art. I also have Android, the board game on which this entire universe is based on at home. Have played it twice, I think. Interesting, but messy. I used to have Infiltration, another game set in the Android universe by Donald X. Vaccarino, but I traded it away because it didn't get played and wasn't that exciting. And there is Mainframe, which I haven't played, which is basically...
It's an abstract game, right?
Basically an abstract game. In Germany, we used to play this a simplified variant. I don't know the English name for the game. I'm sure school kids play this well on graph paper. It's Käsekästchen, where you sort of put in a line and you're trying to complete an entire block and then you can score it. That's the basic idea of Mainframe as well, as far as I remember. But Mainframe apparently has some special abilities that makes it a bit more interesting. So there's a bunch of games set in this universe. Some good, some okay, some interesting. And I'm not entirely sure that the universe as it is really holds together. And it seems more like a collection of, more or less thematically coherent art pieces.
Well, I mean, it seems to me that both of these FFG self-contained universes, the Android universe and Tyrannoth, Descent and Room Wars and all of that sort of stuff, they seem to be hopelessly generic, right? They seem to be platforms for the games. But if you look at Descent, I love Descent. I think Descent's a great game. Yeah. But its universe isn't arresting or interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, they don't make the same sort of childish mistakes that Petition's Mouth made with, trying to invent a universe based upon a Ronnie James Dio song. But certainly it's generic. And this generic cyberpunk thing seems very generic. And I think because of that, no one really cares about the universes these games inhabit, right?
I think this feeling of genericness stems from the fact that there's no central narrative in this universe. Like if you look at something like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, you have a central narrative there. It's the book or the movies that sort of
give birth to the universe.
Exactly. Have this core narrative, like this is the story, that's the main story, and everything else is on the periphery. And people love diving into the periphery and expanding the original story. That's why you now have sequels like 25 years later.
Of course, everyone loves those things, right? Where you're a guy in a little town at the edge of something.
Right.
And there's a tremor and everyone goes, what was that? And you look into the sky and someone's just blown the Death Star up. But the whole story is set in this little town.
Yeah.
Right? You know, people living on the edge of great history is always really exciting.
Exactly. It's one of the main appeals or used to be one of the main appeals of the Warhammer Fantasy role-playing game.
Yeah.
You have these big, huge battles, but the role-playing game used to be about this small drunk student getting into fight and maybe get shifted in a back alley somewhere. Very, very funny. Well, not funny stories, but very unique and unique stories. And that's kind of what seems to be missing in this Android universe.
Well, do you think that because they're created for games and they're created for players, that they essentially don't have any heroes? Their universe is without heroes. They have player characters.
Right.
But none of them are particularly, you don't grab onto any of them.
Right.
And so, you have this universe that is created to be the backdrop to games, but that's essentially all it is just a backdrop.
Exactly. I think this is I think the biggest issue that the Android universe has, because from my experience playing Netrunner, you do have these individual characters that you build decks around or decks for. And they're fun, and the way you sort of build these decks and play these decks, they sort of give these characters, well, some dimension, some.
But it's a mechanical impetus, right?
Sure, but still, when you play them, you do feel like, all right, this character, because of their ability and because of the cards that I've added to this deck, plays a certain way. Plays this game a certain way. And there's a certain sense of identity that you get with your deck. But again, it's not like a shared narrative of everyone who joins into this universe. Not everyone is going to play, your one character, blanking on all the names right now. Kate. I think one of the base characters is called Kate. Not everyone's going to play Kate in your way. You're never going to recognize this Kate because she always plays.
And so they're not going to be archetypical of this world. I mean,
Exactly.
I think what D&D did is they wrote books.
Yeah.
And so they have certain sort of archetypes. I mean, the books are terrible, but nevertheless.
Yeah, they don't have to be good, but they're yeah.
They have Dristoerden and that sort of thing. Heroes that inhabit the world, which gives the world depth. Whereas it seems with the Android universe and the Tyrannoth universe, that they're ways to dress a game up to make it look cool, to appeal to a consumer.
But then again, there are Android books out there. I think there's a trilogy and now I think an anthology, I believe. I'm not entirely sure, but I think there are 3 or 4 books out there set in the Android universe. One of them I wanted to pick up as well because the original trilogy is very, very difficult to get. Came out recently and it's an anthology, I think, of short stories, all set mostly around the Netrunner part of the Android universe. They do seem appealing, but they don't seem to have this defining or universe shaping character to them. I remember.
Which comes back to genericness, right? It's just, it looks like, Tyrannoth looks like every other bullshit fantasy novel I've ever seen. Whereas I don't know a huge amount about cyberpunk, but Android looks like every bullshit cyberpunk thing without any of the sort of originality that first impacted those first that wave of cyberpunk writers.
I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of uniqueness in the Android universe. Mostly based on the groundwork laid in Android, the original game. The universe based. I know Kevin Wilson was part of the creators of the original universe, and another person, I'm blanking on the name. Obviously he's listening to us right now because everybody is. So I'm very sorry if I don't remember your name. There were 2 people involved and there were a lot of really, really interesting, really progressive ideas on what to do with the gaming universe. Like moving New Angeles to Mexico as opposed to just replacing New Angeles. The idea of sort of having this very, very multiracial, multicultural, very inclusive universe because and I think Netrunner was very, very aware of that these characters weren't all just white males. They were of the same body type. There were different ages, there were different ethnicities, there were different genders. I think at least one character at some point was, an amputee she was missing an arm. I don't remember it being explained. It was just there. One of the characters you play is missing a hand, I believe.
And that's the thing. But because it seems constructed around a game, that there's nothing narratively to dive into apart from the games. And so these characters become subsumed by the mechanics, and then fundamentally the world doesn't thrive. It's just a backdrop. It's scene dressing and nothing else.
Sure,
right?
but that's true of all games set in a shared universe. I mean, if I were to play a Star Wars game, if I were to play Imperial Assault, for example, I'm still playing with these generic characters,
yes,
and
you're
occasionally
right.
these
you're right,
non-characters
but
show up.
The world is so defined and so deep.
Yes, exactly.
Because it's been created in a medium that has heroes and narrative and something to grab onto, whereas creating a world for a game doesn't give you that scope. Therefore, the world itself can't breathe in the way that a film or a book can.
I think it's interesting to compare this to Android Universe to the Tempest Universe from AEG. They put out 4 or 5 games a few years ago. One of them became this huge mega selling hit, even though it wasn't originally set there. Love Letter. Yeah. But there were 3 other games originally. Dominario was one of them. Canalis was the 4th one, I believe. And 2 other games. I'm very forgetful today. And they had a very, very strong sense of narratives in between the games. Characters kept showing up. Characters from one house showed up in another house. The princess who was like a central figure in Love Letter, showed up in Courtier was one of the games. Showed up in Courtier. She showed up in Dominare. I haven't played Canalis, so I don't know. Mercante, I think, was another one. These characters showed up again. I think there was an attempt to build a coherent universe in which games took place in.
But if it doesn't happen within the same box, it's almost impossible to build that universe because people are picking and choosing from different games, right? So people are going to watch reviews and go, I don't like that, but Canalis looks good. Yeah. And so you miss all of that narrative block, whereas as a movie, you're sort of tied into the story as it's being told.
Yeah, I think I will agree with the idea that what Android is missing, the Android universe is missing, is a central narrative, central characters to sort of ground the entire universe in a way that is appealing. So interestingly enough, I think a game like New Angeles could possibly work if it was tooled differently, if it had like the big movers and shakers of that universe that you would play. If, for example, you're playing... If the universe...
Well, you are though, right?
Yes, but
as the corporations, as the head of the corporations,
right.
you're playing the big movers and shakers in the Android universe, but they're so generic as to be uninteresting.
No, I don't think I agree. I think you are playing these characters, but you do not get the feel. It doesn't seem like these characters are the movers and shakers of the universe. You're the movers and shakers like in universe, but not narratively. Like, for example,
then there's no Han Solos or Luke Skywalkers.
Exactly.
There, right?
That's the issue. I mean, the characters themselves, I think, the woman running Haas Bioroid showed up in a lot of Netrunner art, and I'm quite certain she shows up all over the place. I think she is a big and recognizable character. So is the CEO of Jinteki. So a lot of these corporations, if you've played a bit of Netrunner, you sort of recognize these faces because they show up again and again in the arts on the card. Again, the coherent narrative is missing, and there hasn't been a big push to sort of create a coherent narrative. I think, if anything, Android, the original game, should probably have been the ground zero for the central narrative of the universe, but for various reasons, it didn't do that. So I think what the universe is missing right now, or the Android universe is missing right now, is a game that is all about the defining characters. These characters, when you play them at the end of the game, they will have sort of a legacy game set in the Android universe that will completely change it and will establish these characters that show up again and again in a certain way. The way, let's say, Darth Vader or Luke Skywalker shows up in Imperial Assault occasionally, or Han Solo. They're not necessarily characters you play, but they're characters that sort of define the purpose, the concept, the style, and the feel of the universe. And this, I think, is what the Android universe is missing right now, and that's the reason why it feels generic and why nobody seems to be that invested into it.
Well, let's go from a game possibly in the future to the actual game that exists right now.
Good plan.
So, what did you think of my interactive, candid photo montage?
Well, it was certainly an experience.
So, I've played this game about 5 or 6 times.
Yes.
George, you played a couple of times.
Yes.
And
I have to add, though, just a preemptively, I have very, very complicated thoughts about this game, and I am not, despite how I might occasionally sound like, I'm not fully willing to defend every single opinion I'm going to espouse now, but these are my impressions based on the games I've played, but I'm reserving the right to sort of change it if I play it more.
We're talking about experience here. And we played the game twice in the last week.
Yes.
And we had two massively varied experiences. And
Not massively varied between the two of us, though.
No, we had the same experience in one game and pretty much the same experience in the other game, right? I think we both felt the same about the experiences that we had. Yeah. Which goes to show, I think, that this game is not only incredibly group dependent, which it is, but incredibly context dependent in where you're playing the game, how many people are there, how much noise is there, and how you react to that sort of thing. So tell us let's talk about the first experience we had.
The first experience was not the best. And if one of the guys we talked there is now currently listening to this episode because we mentioned the podcast, we all blame you. It was, for various reasons, was difficult. It was challenging in many ways because, I think this is the first point where we're probably going to differ. I would argue that New Angeles is a co-op game with the serial numbers filed off. There's a lot of extra rules tacked on to sort of change it and move it around. But at its heart, the design is a co-op game with some house rules to sort of push it out of this co-op zone.
Whereas I think the entire beating heart of the game comes at its ruthlessly competitive nature. There are things you have to do. There is maintenance of the game that you have to do. You have to keep the game ticking along so the game doesn't crash.
Right.
But where the play comes in, where the negotiation comes in, where the fun comes in, is being ruthlessly competitive and fighting your own corner, right?
I'm not sure. I think I'm going to talk about this later in the design because I'm laying a lot of the blame for the flaws of the game at the design. Because the experience, as you said, is very group dependent. And I think if the group can sort of manage to fill in the blanks in just the right way to sort of push the design or ignore the design where the group has to ignore it, you can have a fantastic experience with it.
Well, the point is, you've got games that are sort of live on the table or games that live above the table.
Right.
And games that live above the table, where it's a lot of talking, a lot of negotiating, a lot of back and forth, Resistance, Secret Hitler, those kind of games. New Angeles is one of those. Is so dependent upon the people around the table. Because there are people who will deliberately grind the game to a halt, for instance. And New Angeles is not a short game.
No.
And if you have people who are being truculent and they are refusing to move, then the game will just drag and drag and drag. You need some sort of mutual ethos of improvisation. Right. Essentially, we're all sitting down at this game to agree to say yes. We may not agree with each other the whole time, but there's a certain agreement that we keep it clipping along and we keep it fun. And the first experience, I think, there was a player for whom winning was more important than enjoying themselves.
Right.
And in a game like this, which has an open-ended length, can be absolutely fatal, right?
It can be difficult, yeah. I think the best way to describe my experience of the game itself, not just the group experience, but how I experienced the game itself, was that it felt like a Frankenstein's monster type of deal. There were different elements in there, all sort of mushed together, trying to make it work. And I felt, for the most part, it was up to the group to make the spaces where the design doesn't sort of really support you, where you have to sort of pick it up and make it work yourself. Like, for example, like you said, realizing how highly you value winning in the game and when you start caring about it and when you stop caring about it and how you react to these various incentives the game gives you. I think that was really difficult to sort of maneuver my way through what the game wants me to do, what the game is sort of telling me I should care for and what I shouldn't care for.
Well, the game is an engine for negotiation. It's an engine for discussion. It's an engine for back and forth.
Right.
I think as that, it really works. I've never had an issue any time I've played it. I mean, the thing is, the first time we played, it was a really hot day. It was in a room that was absolutely packed. It was super loud.
Yeah.
And then we were playing with a couple of players who were being truculent, who were being, who were arguing minutiae to score moral victories, which is never going to work. Second time, we played in someone's flat. It was nice. The atmosphere was good. The people were not sort of focused on the minutiae and extracting every possible advantage they could out, and they let the game flow, which made the game a lot more enjoyable.
Yes, but now I feel like, on the one hand, if you're arguing that it's a cutthroat competitive game, you can't really argue that people shouldn't leverage every advantage they can get. So I mean, again, this is the game pushing you in two different directions. On the one hand, you're supposed to be competitive and cutthroat. On the other hand, you shouldn't leverage every advantage you have, even if it is minutia, because that's where the game should help you.
I guess, though, then that's about sort of instinct. And I think in games like this, without wanting to blow my own trumpet, I ride that balance between playing the game competitively, but not bogging it down into rules lawyering to such an extent that the game becomes enjoyable. And you have to know when you're doing that and pull off the trigger.
Right. To go back to what I mentioned earlier, because this kind of ties into, this balance, I try to find a nice way to sort of capture a phrase that describes the game. And I think it's the one that resonated with where I thought, this is how I feel about the game, was that New Angeles is a cooperative game for alpha gamers. Because this is the core experience of the game. In a regular cooperative game, most cooperative games, rather, people sit together and debate what the next move should be. They coordinate, all right, this is our objective, this is our shared objective. How do we get there? Who can help in what way? This is sort of I feel this is the original idea of New Angeles. There's a cooperative game. We, as CEOs of these big corporations, have the objective of keeping the city going long enough. How do we get there? And in play, this is what happens. You have the active player who suggests the next action to achieve a certain objective. In this case, the demands. Certain resources need to be produced in 2 steps. Twice, you have 2 chances to get the entire city arranged in such a way that the producers you need are the resources you need are produced, and demand is met, and everything goes swimmingly. So that's one thing. So the entire core idea is that one player plays the card and says, we should do this. And then everybody else has the option to say, no, we should do something else instead, which is how how I think a lot of people would recognize a cooperative game to work.
Yeah.
And where it becomes about alpha gaming is that the negotiation, if you want to call it that, and I'm hesitant to do that, is about arguing for the validity of your suggestion.
And also doing things that are clearly born out of self-interest and making people understand that your self-interest benefits them, regardless of whether it does. I think if you've ever said a thing on this show that is truer, it's that statement that this is absolutely a cooperative game for alpha gamers.
Yeah, that's the core idea.
And that's how it should be marketed too.
Exactly.
Because I think that really is the feeling of the play. My experience of this game, I've played semi-co-ops before.
Right.
And I felt that they've not worked, whereas there is one, and we'll talk about this in the design section, but there's one choice that they made in this game, which just fires all of that semi-cooperativeness and actually makes it feel like a semi-co-op.
Actually, we're going to argue about it because I feel very differently about, probably we're thinking about the same rule, but I feel very different about that. But let's, let me just shortly continue this. The problem I have with this, with this experience was that if you're looking from the lens of a cooperative game, like let's ignore the argument of self-interest because that's assumption about player behavior. But if you're looking at this idea, you need to look at the board state, you need to look at what's needed and what's possible and how to get there. It becomes kind of a puzzle. The point where I feel that the idea of negotiation is undermined by the game is that there seems to be a direct route, optimal route that you can argue for to get from one space to the next, to get from where you start at the beginning of turn 1 to where you need to be at the demand phase when the
But that's wonderful though. But that's wonderful because then what you have to then do as a player is then say, okay, this is clearly the optimal fucking route.
Yes.
But there I need to get some of mine. And that's where the juice comes in.
Alright, so how about this? You take a tenuous grasp of reality, a lot of condescension, at least 4 cups, and a slow-wittedness masked through pretensions of prolixity.
Well, that's you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's design.
So I think what we're talking about here, now I assume I'm reading your mind here,
clearly
is the one aspect of the game for me that makes it absolutely, unquestionably semi-co-op and not a cooperative experience. So we'll come back to what you said previously and why I don't agree entirely, is that at the beginning of the game, you're dealt a card, and this tells you who your competitor is for the game. And all you've got to do to win is beat that person. You're not going to beat everyone else. You've just got to beat that person, which results in multiple winners potentially and multiple losers.
Right.
And this is where what we were talking about just now, where there's a clear path to do, but you need to get in the way of that path if you're going to get some of yours, is where the game lives, right?
It hasn't been my experience. I think, I was thinking about this a lot after we played these two games together. And, I was trying to figure out, because I love the idea of individual winners. I love the idea of the rivals, the fact that you don't have to, like you said, beat everybody else. And the more I thought about it, I realized this seems like a fix for a issue of gameplay, because if you assume at some point in the development, you had the traditional, whoever has the most money wins. And you have the setup as it is. You have these 6 rounds in total, 3 cash outs, but with the option of everything crashing to a halt because there's
a traitor.
Not a traitor, because there was too much unrest. There was too much threat going up, because when threat reaches 25, the game ends.
Yeah, but there is a traitor because it's an active person trying to push up that.
Yes,
threat,
but
right.
Yes, my argument is, let's put this aside. We can return to this in a second.
Okay.
But my argument is this. Once you introduce the idea, because when you have everybody fighting for top spot, you realize about 2/3 through, you're not going to win, because you have 3 cash outs at most. If you fail both of them, if you don't get the money you need after the second cash out, you have no chance of winning if anyone else actually got money. So at this point, you return to this old archipelago criticism, the fact that people will start tanking the game. And the fix to that, and I think it's an interesting fix, but I don't think it fundamentally changes the nature of the game, is that you say you don't have to beat everyone to still have a chance at winning. You just have to beat one person, because this way you can still keep the last third of the game going, because you might still reach your objective. I mean, you might be unlucky and the person that's your rival actually managed to succeed in both times they get a lot of money. In that case, tough luck. But there's still ways in which you can sort of do things. And I think as a fix, it works. I think I love this rule individually. I love it. I want to adapt it to all kinds of Euro games that I had issues with because of that player dynamic of needing to be top dog because anything else means nothing. And I love that rival mechanism. But it does lead then to this idea that it's somehow, because I think that the beating heart of the game is not the rivals. I think the rival is a fix for an issue of tension arc of the game.
Right.
I think the heart of the game are the investment cards that are cash out 3 times in the game after the second round, the 4th round, and then after the 6th round. This is where you get money. This is your short-term goal. This is how you try to get ahead, to get past your opponent, past your rival. And the biggest issue I have with this is that it's twofold. First, it often directly contradicts the aforementioned optimal path to get to demand, which I think is supposed to be the main tension. But the problem I have, or the problem I realized when I played these games, was that if there is an optimal path, you have rational arguments that can't be refuted, that can't be put in doubt on what you should.
We fundamentally disagree here on what the core of the game is, it seems. You're seeing it as a co-op puzzle in which we're meeting demand in the city. And there are optimum paths and these can't be gainsaid. And
yes,
we can only speculate what happened in development because we don't have the designer here. And you see the rival mechanism as a fix for a co-op issue.
Yeah.
Whereas because of my interpretation of the game, because of what I get out of the game fundamentally and what I enjoy about the game, it seems equally as plausible that in the development they came up with the rival thing first and then thought that's brilliant, let's build a game around that. Mm-hmm. Because for me, that's what I love about it, is that the game exists solely above the table. It is a great modeler for unrighteous self-interest. And if we're talking about sort of thematic integration into this world where corporations who are fundamentally self-interested are the de facto governments of this world, benefit of the people is never the primary consideration. So the optimum path is never the primary consideration. It's all about, I gotta get mine. And I love that aspect of this game. I think that's where the spark is. I think that's where the joy is. And I don't see it as a co-op. I see it as a legitimately different thing. I see it as a series of minor alliances where you're making friends with people temporarily to allow you to get what you want. It is about rampant, rapacious self-interest. And I think the game models that wonderfully.
Yeah, I think you phrased it nicely. The experience you've had, I mean, this is what we're basing this entire review on. The experience we've had when we played this game.
Well, I think this game, more than a lot of other games we've reviewed, is about the experience, right? It's about what happens above the table. The game fails if you don't talk to people, right?
Yes, that is true. But I think that I'm a firm believer that design should always support experience. Experience can't live on its own, because if you rely on the experience itself and you don't really care how design feeds into it, you're basically pushing all the responsibility for making a game fun onto the players themselves.
But I think the design really supports the experience. I have found that this rival mechanism really supports the experience. The fact that you only get certain types of cards that you can then do certain types of action with supports the experience. The assets, being able to pull the rug out from under people, supports the experience. Being able to trade and bribe and coerce and suborn supports the experience. I think so many facets of the design support the experience. But that's because I'm seeing it as this cutthroat pursuit of self-interest. If you see it as a co-op game, then that other stuff gets in the way.
Yeah, no, I'd phrase it differently. I looked at the game and I see the dynamics of the game, I see the rules, and to me, they spell out co-op game with tacked on rules. And that's why I feel so uneasy about this game. I think one of the reasons, I mean, if our listeners had the misfortune of downloading some of the slices I recorded, I once talked about negotiation, and one of the main arguments I had was the negotiation needs to be about flexible positions, needs to be about multiple viewpoints being valuable and true. And this game doesn't give me that. It doesn't. You can't have. I mean, I'm specifically reminded of one of the last turns we played in the last game we played together. I made the case for a definite case for what we need to do to meet demand, because if we don't meet demand, we lose the game. It might sound a bit arrogant now, and I'm sorry for that, but I do think this was the only legitimate option. And the only reason why one player tanked it, I think there were two reasons, but the main reason why he tanked it was because he was my rival and tried to sort of block me. But even then, once he did this, he realized that was a mistake, because that was against his own interest. I think it was a secondary reason, but I don't think we need to dive into that. I mean, he was trying to get cards out of your hand, but I think that which was I think strategically sound reason to do what he did, but he did it at the wrong time. So ultimately, that ended the game. And to me, this moment sort of clarified that if the only reason why you don't support, if the game gives you reasons not to support the thing that's in your interest, to me it does not spell an interesting game or a nice tension, but it spells a game that if you play it long enough, you know it well enough, these moments will stop happening, this tension will disappear. It's never about, because to me, these moments should be about, how do I want to risk this? Which risk do I want to take? Both options are viable, and it's up to my decision which one I want to pursue, and not, do I get tricked or do I actually figure out the right facts?
And that's what I love about the rival mechanism, about you're going to be going up against someone else every time, pretty much, is that it promotes overreaching, it promotes hubris, and it promotes mistakes. And that's where the enjoyment comes out of it. I mean, if you want it to just be a great, efficient thing, then just model a computer program to play the game, right? It's that whole spanner in the works of self-interest blinding you to the best possible path for your benefit. I mean, it's fucking Brexit writ large, right? It's this idea that Turkeys vote for Christmas because they have some misguided perception of what's good for them. And I think this game models that wonderfully.
Maybe. I think this brings me to the other aspect that I want to talk about, the experience, and that's not really hard, not difficult to pin down to certain rules. But it seems to me both times, and I can't really find a way to sort of settle my issue with this, with the game on this, is that whether I as a player win or lose has more to do with the mistakes other people make than with whether I play cleverly.
I've never found that once when I played the game. I've never found that once. I found that I can corral people to make mistakes simply by inaction or simply by railroading everybody. And that's where the game survives. Maybe I'm just a dickhead and I'm good at that, but I never found other people's mistakes interfered with my ability to play the game well.
Well, they did with me. In both cases, I think the first game we played, the only reason I lost, as in I didn't beat my rival, was that...
You did in the first game. You beat me.
No, you didn't beat me, but I had somebody else as a rival.
Ah, that's right. I'm very self-focused, Georgios.
I noticed. And it was very interesting because the only way to sort of hamper your rival is to keep them from gaining money. The only way to keep them from gaining money is if you know how they will gain money, in their investment cards. But because there are so many investment cards and there's so few chances to infer information about the investment cards, you have little to no way of figuring out how to stop somebody else. So even if you score really, really well, you still need to hope that your rival does not, and you have no way of affecting that other than blatantly naysaying anything he suggests. And that does not scream to me a functional game mechanic.
Well, that's really interesting because you have a different scoring mechanic as well. Every faction has a way they score that everyone knows how they're scoring.
Yeah, but that's very small though.
Well, not necessarily though, because I always score very well off those things. I always position myself to score very well because you're looking at 2 or 3 different turns. You're scoring as many points off those scoring things potentially as you are off your big investments. It's just having to line them up. Okay, let's move on because I think we can mutually agree to dismally agree.
Yes, dismally agree, yes.
Playing this made me want to play.
All right then, Georgios, what did this make you want to play?
I'm going to follow my tradition now in breaking the rules because it made me want to play multiple games.
Ooh.
Because, again...
So you've chosen computer games before, and now you're choosing multiple games.
Yes.
I chose a game I hadn't played last week.
Excellent. Yeah, because, again, reiterating the point I made earlier, New Angel is, to me, a Frankenstein's monster type of game, in that it has different concepts, different ideas, pulling you in different direction, and never quite, settling on one, forcing you to figure out how to play the game interestingly. The one game, if it's the cooperative game, the coordination, the suggest what to do next aspect of the game, that kind of reminded me of Big Book of Madness.
Okay.
Which is a nice, we reviewed a long while back. It's a full co-op game. It's all about proper coordinating the different abilities you have and the different special abilities and how to plan ahead. And that sort of captures part of the feel of New Angeles as you try to arrange the various resources in the city to meet demand. That's one aspect. The other aspect, and that's sort of like the negotiation aspect, which I think this game does better because it's cleaner, it's shorter, and it's more on point. It's actually an underrated game, and so probably going to disappear from a circulation soon because I've seen the publisher just, constantly discounting it. And that is Article 27, the United Nations Security Council game, which is a mouthful. It's very colorful. It's very bright. It has a wooden gavel, but it is very much about each turn you have your objectives, how you score points. You're trying to argue for them. You have a timer that really shortens the game time. It is, unfortunately, it tends to break occasionally, and it's up to the players to sort of develop this ethos to keep it going, and which is at some point, a certain situation, you can just continuously block every suggestion, even if you pay a big price, and still, come out ahead because of the way people have played before. But since it's a short game, you can sort of have another go, learn from your mistakes, not overbribe people to vote your way. And again, I think if I was looking for this kind of cutthroat negotiation element, I would prefer to go to Article 27 because I think it's more focused and it's clear what it wants you to do, and it's clear how to play it well, and you're never confused about, you never feel you're making mistakes. You own every decision, and your victory is really in your own hands and not based on other people's mistakes.
Yeah, the game I want to play is obvious, we've mentioned it before, is Archipelago, and that's because I think it's the direct inspiration for New Angeles. It has very many similar aspects with having a traitor that's trying to crash the game to try and win. But I think Archipelago is much more of an on-the-table game. Archipelago is much more of a rigorous mechanical game that isn't prone to that problem of just grinding to a halt because of loose mechanics. It's a Euro game at its heart, whereas I don't think New Angeles is. And so I want to go back to, after playing New Angeles, I want to go back to Archipelago and play something that has the same ethos, but that is a bit more rigorously designed to see if they are truly comparisons with each other. And I think that would be an interesting thing to do. So,
Possibly, yeah.
Georgios.
Yes.
Should people go out and buy New Angeles?
No. It's, well, first of all, it's very expensive. If that does not factor into your decision, I would argue it has, I mean, you sort of phrased my argument against it, but in a positive way. If you have a gaming group that sort of shares a certain ethos, that will sort of play the game in a certain way and sort of put emphasis on certain aspects of the game, like keeping it going, like how important are the rivals, how important are the investments, how important is the negotiation aspect, and so on, then that might work. You might actually be able to sit down and make this game work, by which I mean it will be a fun experience. I think the game itself doesn't do enough to facilitate a functioning experience. It relies on players to fixing everything that the game doesn't bother to fix. And that I think shouldn't. That would be the kind of game that is fun to play once or twice, but then at some point I wouldn't pull it out of my shelf because it's just too much work to get fun out of it. I would feel too much like, will this work this time with this combination of people? Will this work with when we're in this mood? And I just don't know. So I think there's so many games out there that are more reliable, that are more solid, they're more rigidly designed, that provide a similar experience that I would suggest instead.
For me, if you use these reviews as inspirations to buy games, you really have to decide on this review who you trust more, me or Georgios, because I love this game. I've always had a great time apart from one time. And this is the one caveat, right? There's two caveats. One, it's bloody too expensive. But, with internet discounting and stuff. Secondly, it can be group dependent. I played it 6 times. I've had a great time 5 times, and one time was crashed by a combination of heat and noise and a couple of dickheads, right? So I find this game invigorating, fun. There's a lot of great push and pull. I think I'm more optimistic about human beings than Georgios is. So I just naturally assume that when I get to play this game, it's going to be fantastic and everyone's going to be wonderful. And so if you can get it at a good price, and you will, because I assume it didn't sell hugely well, not many people are talking about it, so it will be discounted, I would pick up this game. It's a great push and pull game with a lot of fun negotiation, but if you're a person who just likes looking at a board and manipulating mechanics, then maybe I'd steer clear.
Really? I'm sorry, I need to add, weren't you touting that you were the Eurogamer and I was the thematic gamer? Wouldn't you be arguing for good mechanics over experience? Have we switched roles sometime?
Yeah, that's why I'm wearing the sock.
You're right.
Well, Georgios, as night follows day and cats...
Again with the poems? I am sick of the poems. Aren't you sick of the poems?
No, I do them every fucking time. I love the poems.
No, but they barely rhyme, and at some point that you trail off and just go blah, blah, blah. You invent words to sort of make it fit.
As day follows night and cats follow mice, the quotient of labiliousness is blegumptious in its complexitude. How do people contact us, Georgios?
They can go to our website. It's infoperfected.com. They can write us an email because we can actually read. We might not sound like it, but we can. At infoperfected.
We received an email from South African people who are coming to Berlin.
Yes.
And they're coming to the Perfect Information Towers on Sunday to play games with us, Georgios.
So basically, when people are listening to this has already happened. So you're talking about... Oh my God.
It was wonderful. They were lovely people. We had a great time. They bought me some booze.
Yeah, and Ben was very sorry about,
Whatever I said, literally, I'm very sorry about it.
And sticking the hand where he stick his hand in. Yeah, so infoperfected@gmail.com is our email address. We are on Twitter. Twitter? We are on Twitter. Perfect info.
Info Perfected, at Info Perfected, and at Perfected Info.
That is us indeed. We are on Instagram, Perfect Information. We are on Facebook, the Perfect Information Podcast,
Indeed.
I believe. We are also on Board Game Geek. It's the Guild, which is 2348, the Guild of Perfect Information.
And now, we launched last week to very little fanfare, although some uptake, which I was actually quite surprised and gratified at. Our Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/perfect information.
Yes, we got the URL. We are amazing.
There's a video up there,
Yes,
just explaining why we need your money
And what you get for it.
And what you get for it. And you can pledge. You can read our page, and you can give us a couple of quid every month just to help us improve the show, improve our lives, and maybe I get my toenails cut.
Maybe. Just a quick reminder. I have heard inklings on the intrawebs that some people worry about pledging too low. And let me tell you, there's no such thing. It is literally every dollar that's pledged, is like literally $1 a month is a sign that you like what we do, and we are happy for it. I mean, it's enough. It's literally enough.
But frankly, if you pledge $50 a month, I'm going to fucking sleep with you.
Again, and for a reason now to actually do that, basically, don't worry if for some reason you feel, I can only afford $1 a month, that would come across as bad, or they will think strangely of me. We don't. We appreciate every single Patreon, no matter how much they pledge. It's very much appreciated. It's a sign that what we do does not just disappear into the ether. It's actually, people do like listening to it, and it's a great boost of confidence for both of us whenever we see somebody new pledging. So don't be hesitant to pledge, even if it's just $1 a month. It's very much appreciated.
And we've promised shout-outs. Shout-outs will come on the next episode when the Patreon has sort of calmed down a bit.
I hope it doesn't calm down, actually.
And you'll get your Perfect Information handle, which you'll able to get printed at your own expense on a t-shirt and wear around the worldy world.
Pretty much, yeah.
Say goodnight, Georges.
No, I'm going to look up the t-shirt prices, because I want my own handle explained on a t-shirt.
Georgie Porges.
That's not my handle.